Guys, I'm Joe with JoeMartinMVC. Today we're going to take a look at how to detail a car and properly prepare the surface before applying a ceramic coating. If you enjoyed the content I'm putting out, go ahead, comment, like, subscribe below, and also hit that notification bell so you get notifications for new content as it comes out. As always, enjoy the video. Let's get to it. So the materials we're going to be using today are the Meguiar's Dual Action Polisher, Meguiar's Heavy Cutting Pad, Meguiar's Cutting Pad, and Meguiar's Polishing Pad. These are all part of the Meguiar's microfiber set. We'll be using Optimum's No Rinse Wash and Wax as our clay bar lubricant, and then Meguiar's Clay Bar, Optimum Hyper Polish, Optimum Hyper Compound, and then we'll finish it off with isopropyl alcohol before applying our ceramic coating. This will be used to remove all oils from the surface so we have a good clean surface to apply it to. Alright, so starting off, we're going to take our clay bar and knead it in our hands to make it nice and pliable. We want it to be about as big as 3 fingers across, and we want a nice flat disc. We're going to take our clay bar lubricant and liberally spray the area so we can ensure the clay will gently glide across the surface and not get stuck and mar the surface or scratch it and pick up the contaminants. And the dilution ratio for the Optimum No Rinse Wash and Wax to water is 3 capfuls to 32 ounces. This will make sure it's a nice strong lubricant for you. And before we actually use the clay bar, we're going to take one of our microfiber cloths and do a very gentle wipe down to get the surface contaminants and dirt off. Because we didn't actually wash the car before doing this, we're doing this as a waterless car wash for this part, which is something we're going to touch base on in another video. And when we do this, we're not using any pressure, just gently going across the surface, letting the lubricant do the work for lifting the contaminants off of the surface. As you can see, we have quite a bit of dirt that's on the cloth. We wouldn't want to pick that up in our clay bar, because then it could scratch and mar the surface. So we're going to flip the cloth over to a clean side, and then spray the surface again. Myself personally, I prefer to have a little too much lubricant on the surface and have to take a few extra moments to get all the lubricant off when I'm done, over having my clay bar stick, because if it's dry, it can mar the surface or cause little scratches, and that's obviously something we're trying to avoid here. And we're just using small circular motions, and the reason we're doing this is to pick up the surface level contaminants, so that way when we go to buff and polish, we don't end up grinding the surface level contaminants into the paint and causing more damage. It also helps keep your pads alive for a little bit longer because it doesn't get stuck in the pads either. As you can see, our clay bar is getting a little dirty. If it begins to get dirty, that's fine. Simply just re-knead the clay and continue as you were. And just keep going. Alright, so we're all done. So we'll set the clay with the rest of the clay that we have there. And then using our microfiber cloth, we're just going to gently wipe down and glide over the panel. This is just removing the excess lubricant. We're not aiming to dry the panel at the moment. And once the cloth gets sufficiently wet on that side, we flip over to a drier side. And then it's just the same thing, just wipe down again. We're just trying to get the excess lubricant off. The next step is where we'll actually make sure we dry the panel completely and get ready to do our masking. And we're still using just nice gentle motions, and since this cloth is getting a little too wet, we will move over to our next cloth. This is a high pile microfiber cloth, so it will absorb a bit more and it picks up a lot more water. We're just going to use a gentle circular motion, no pressure, as always, to get the last bit of lubricant off. We really want to focus on the emblem and then down here on the black plastic. And the reason for that is because we're going to have to tape that off in a moment, and our tape won't stick if there's any moisture on the surface. And of course, we're still using just gentle pressure. We're not actually applying any pressure onto it, just letting the cloth glide across the surface. And then next up, we'll be masking off and ensuring we have no excess moisture behind anything like the turn signal or down in the black plastic area. Alright, so this is not necessary. This is just extra and convenient for areas like this where water can get trapped behind it. This has both heat and power, and it's a very powerful little blower. And I don't know if you can read the label there, it says pet dryer. This is actually something I picked up for my puppy or for my dog to make sure he gets completely dry and doesn't have any moisture left in his coat. And I use it down here on the black plastic just to make sure that it's completely dry. The heat definitely helps out with that. And we just do this to make sure it's completely dry. As I said, this is not a necessary tool. It can be done with just a towel. I just happen to have a dryer, so I use it. So next up, we're going to mask off the area that we're going to be detailing. The most important parts for me are the black area down here because it's plastic. It'll get polish in it, it'll turn white, look terrible, and it'll be a nightmare to get off. And then on this car, for example, there's this black seal, and if we get polish in there, it's going to show up and be almost impossible to get out. And you can see where someone got some in there at some point before I owned this car. So we're going to mask off right here, through here, mask off here, down, and get the headlight. And I'm just using simple blue duck masking tape. You don't have to use anything too crazy. I mean, frog tape is pretty good too. Main thing is you don't want to use anything too strong like duct tape or anything that has a residue because you don't want to leave that on the paint or risk damaging the paint with it. Just gotta go slow, focus, make sure you're getting the little divot there between the panels. It definitely helps. Now we're going to put a line down here. I like to use the 2-inch tape for the most part. It would help if I was doing it the right way. It's just a little nicer. You have a bigger buffer area with your buffer. But for the tighter areas, you'll have to use, of course, the 1-inch or maybe even smaller tape depending on what it is you're detailing. Alright, got on the line, just gotta press it in and make sure everything is down all the way. And if you have a situation like this area right here, you just lift it up, realign it. Usually tape like this tends to be a bit more pressure activated than actual adhesive. So just make sure to press it in nice and well so that way it sticks. And this one's just a nice and easy one. Simple straight line. I wish it was all this way. Trying to get that to stick. That ends up coming to bite me a little bit later when I'm polishing, but it wasn't a big deal. Instead of doing this area just as one big piece and fighting with it, I'm just going to do it in 2 sections. And sorry about the terrible angle, you know, joys of head cam, right? Maybe one day I'll, have someone as like a cameraman. That'd be nice. But for now, it's just going to be a GoPro strapped to my head and hope I get the angle right. And have to do multiple retakes. Alright, if you do use a long section of tape like this, try to be a little careful with it. Obviously you don't want it sticking to itself. But you also have to make sure that it doesn't touch anything and pick up any dirt or contaminants, because they'll just get stuck in the paint. For example, I'm keeping it nice and high with my left hand and keeping it away from everything else. And of course I have trouble with it because when you have such a long piece, the force of you holding it away pulls it off the panel. So and the reason we're doing this is we don't want any polish or compound to get in between the two panels. It's a very common rookie mistake that detailers will do. They won't mask off, thinking they're too good. And we got a couple of rock chips. We may fix those later on down the road, but right now it's not too big of a deal. You always want to make sure that your tape lines on the panel you're actually detailing, because you're trying to make sure nothing gets in those gaps. I tend to waste a lot of tape whenever I mask anything off, but I mean, it's pretty cheap stuff, like $3, $4 a roll. It's worth it. Alright, so we've got it masked off, so we're good here. I'm not going to bother masking off the turn signal, it's fine. We're just going to move on to the next step. So the whole point of correction is to try and get out scratches, micro-marring, things like that. I'm not sure if the camera can pick it up, but we have some faint scratches throughout here. We'll take our light, it'll help us see the scratches through here. You pretty much see on the outside edges of the light. Our goal will be to get these out. Now in a paint like this, it's very hard to see any sort of scratches, fine lines, marring, and I doubt the camera will pick it up, but we're going to try. Hopefully it sees it right through here. On paints like black paint, which I'll do a separate video on, you see every minor detail, every minor scratch. So next we're going to move on buffing, polishing, and starting that process. Alright, so we're going to start off with our heaviest cutting pad. Now I know with this car, since I've been working on it, that I need to use the heaviest cutting pad, but it's always best to start as least aggressive as possible. So I'd suggest starting with the cutting pad and not the heavy cutting pad, as you can always step up to a more aggressive pad and polish if you need it. Always make sure you get the pad seated on nice and centered and pressed on so it doesn't fly off, because it will. We're going to start with Optimum's Hyper Compound, and I'll explain why I use this system a little later in the video. But put your finger over the tip, as they tend to leak, and shake hard. The reason we have to shake it is because all the aggregate, the actual polish and compound itself, settles to the bottom, and we will make sure that when we spray it, we actually get the compounding material onto our pads. Once the sprayer is actually primed, it only takes one spray on the pad to prime it and make it functional. It usually takes 3 sprays or so to actually get the spray primed though. So we spin our pad gently, 1, 2, and I usually try to focus a bit on the outer edge as well. So this is more than enough polish to do the whole panel, but I'm going to do it as 2 separate passes. So we're going to do this section first to about here, and then we're going to do the remainder separate. Always make sure you kiss the panel by pressing the pad to it, and then gently spread around the polish. Initially I will be going a bit faster, just so the polish gets spread around on the panel. And then usually you try to maintain a speed of about 1 inch per 2 seconds approximately. And I'm using speed 6 on this polisher, as that's what this product calls for. Always make sure to read the instructions on your bottles to make sure you're using the right speed. So we're going to turn it on and quickly move to minimize splatter, and then we're going to get right up to the tape line, but try not to go over it. And then we're going to move to the corner, and when we get to the corner we're going to angle the pad slightly so we don't go over our tape line and get compound everywhere. Then once we're out of the corner, we're going to go nice and slowly, not applying any pressure, letting the machine and the pad do the work for us. And we want to try and keep the pad as flat on the panel as possible, only raising the pad when necessary to get in the tighter areas. And products used in this video will also be linked in the description down below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, hitting the notification bell so you receive updates for new content as it comes out. Alright, we're going to go ahead and speed up the video a bit here, as I'm sure you guys don't want to watch me just buff a panel for 20 minutes. Be careful around edges like this, as you can easily burn through the paint. While it's hard to do this with a dual action polisher, it can definitely still be done. I'm ashamed to admit that I've actually done it myself in the past. Now, as we turn the polisher off, we want to lift the pad away from the surface as it's turning off. You'll notice that with these microfiber pads that they become a bit matted as you use them, and that's fine. It causes some of the marks that you may see on there, and that's not an issue. Whenever this happens, you have one of two options, which we'll touch on in just a moment. Alright, so there are two ways to clean these pads. The easiest way is with an air compressor, which we'll do second. If you don't have an air compressor, no worries. Take your polisher and turn it down to 2 or 3. I normally start with 2. Then you'll take a soft bristle brush, which this is literally called a detailing brush from Walmart. It's like $5. Turn it on and hold the brush, moving it across the pad. I'm going to increase the speed to 4. You can also hold it at a little bit of an angle to make sure you get more of the fibers. You'll do this for 5-10 seconds. And then you're going to go back and use the brush to go all over the pad to try and get all the fibers up so that way they're not matted into it anymore. Now, as I said, this isn't my preferred way. I prefer air compressor with a very strong blower. This was around $20 at Walmart, and it's extremely powerful. You'll want to do this away from everything, as it is going to put out a lot of dust. Angle it so that way it spins the pad, and let it go for about 5 seconds. And now it's time to move on to the second pass on here. So the pad is already primed and has polish on it, as does the car. So what we're going to do is give the spray bottle a quick shake, spin the pad on the buffer, give it one spray, and go to the car. We're doing a second pass here as I can still see some faint scratches and swirls in the paint. So we're going to keep compounding until I can't see them anymore. We want to remember to let the pad and the machine do the work for us. We're not applying any pressure here, we're just letting it glide over the panel. And once we're done with our second pass, we'll go ahead and blow out our pad again, as it's very likely to be matted, and in this case you'll see that it is, and then get ready for compounding the rest of the fender. Alright, so we're moving on to the second part of the fender now, and we're going to do 2 passes on this part as well, as it had some pretty heavy scratches. And one thing to be wary of is around emblems, turn signals, or anything that sticks out. Hitting them can rip your pad up, get compound stuck underneath the object, and sling compound everywhere, which will make a huge mess. And it's really hard to clean up any of the compound that gets stuck underneath these things. So you'll notice I'll be a little bit more cautious and a little bit slower around it. And we're just going to speed up for the rest of this segment here so you're not watching me compound for another 2 minutes. One thing that I noticed while I was doing this is that my tires look absolutely disgusting. I probably should have given a little bit of attention before doing this video, but I figure what I'll do is when I go to take time to actually clean them and get them, looking nice again, I'll make another video for you guys so that way you can see kind of the process to go through to get, these dirt stains and such off the tires, and how to make them look nice, new, shiny again without putting any of that nasty, oily stuff on the tires that slings off all over your paint. So keep an eye out for that video when it comes. Alright, so we're moving on to the second pass, which will actually be the final part of the compounding that we're doing with the Optimum Hyper Compound. After this, we'll be moving on to the Optimum Hyper Polish with the regular cutting pad and the polishing pad. And then we'll move on to the final steps with the isopropyl alcohol or rubbing alcohol to get rid of any of the oils that are still on the paint after polishing. We'll do a final inspection, make sure everything looks good, that we're ready for ceramic coating. And then we'll go through the process of ceramic coating the fender, putting 2 coats on to make sure it's nice and protected. Hey guys, this video ended up being a bit longer than I expected, so it's being broken up into 2 parts. We'll finish the polishing, the wipe down, applying ceramic coating in part 2. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and make sure to hit that notification bell so that way you'll be notified when part 2 comes out in just a couple of days here. Thanks so much for watching. Take care, guys.